Okay, we are live here. So everyone, welcome. Welcome. My name is Seth Haynes. I write over at Musician's Guide to Hustling.com, and I'm really excited today to have Angela Beeching, who is a music career consultant and coach. Angela, there's so much I could introduce you as, like so many people that come on this show. Can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself, a little bit about your background, and a little bit about your career?
Sure. And thanks, Seth. Nice to be with you. I am Angela Beeching, and I help musicians book more work so that they can live the life they desire. I started out as a cellist. I never in a million years expected that I would be doing this kind of work or that I would write a book on careers for musicians. Really, even at the time, no one was doing any of this kind of work. So I always tell people sometimes the thing that we end up doing is something that hasn't been invented yet. And I think
Sure.
that's a cool thing about careers. They morph in all kinds of interesting ways. So when I was younger and I was just focused on cello, that's all I cared about. I really had wanted to get a doctorate and play a lot of chamber music. I wanted to have a tenure track teaching job. And I always like to tell people that I'm living proof that sometimes you can get exactly what you want and then find out it wasn't exactly how you imagined it was going to
Sure.
be. And that's what happened to me. I had a cello teaching job in California and then in upstate New York. And somehow it didn't sit exactly right. The cool thing was that when I was in grad school, I had complained to the music department. This was at Stony Brook University. I complained that they didn't have any kind of career development resources just for musicians, and I thought that was a reasonable thing. They had the University Career Center, but nothing specific. And so they said to me, the chair of the department said, "Write us a proposal." And unsuspecting me, I wrote up something. I didn't even know what a proposal was, but I wrote up something. And then they
Sure.
turned around and said, "We're going to make this your teaching assistantship. You get to start this
Oh,
thing."
wow.
So yeah, it was smart on their part. They got very cheap labor, and I just never thought that that work was going to come back and bite me in the butt because I was busy getting my doctorate. I studied in Paris for a while. It's just that when I ended up with this teaching job, the second teaching job, and I thought, I don't think this is exactly what I wanted. I moved back to Boston because I love Boston. And eventually, a job opened up at New England Conservatory running their career development office. And because I'd done some work like this as a grad student, I applied. I thought, I'll be there a couple of years. And I was there for 17 because I
Wow.
love this work. I love helping musicians sort of vision their future and then find out their own specific path forward. So I did that work there for a long time. Then I did some work at Indiana University, and for the past 5 years, I was at Manhattan School of Music, but commuting from Boston, which got a little old. Although I love the schools that
Right.
I've worked at, so
Yeah,
so
that's a
now
haul.
yeah, I'm a freelance coach and consultant. I work with individuals, ensembles, and institutions.
Awesome. And so, what would be the first piece of advice you would give somebody? Because I feel like your story is it's so relevant to anybody in the arts. It's like we kind of grow up with these visions of like, oh my God, I'm going to play on this stage and I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this teaching position, and then you get there and it's like, if especially those that are lucky enough to get there, they're like, hmm, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. So, and for people like that, because everybody has like this like ideal thing they want to do, right? I mean, but I think everybody also has these like other interests that they know they could be pursuing, and maybe they're interested in, but they're not sure how to do it and how it plays into like the larger picture. So, what would you what's like one piece of advice? And I'm sure you could probably talk about this for hours, but like what's a piece of advice you would give someone that is a musician or an artist in some way, in some capacity, and wants to start branching out and diversifying what they're doing?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great question, and people are all different about how they go about sort of assessing this. But I think, especially in the culture we live in right now, all of us are sort of bereft or are missing time when we can just think about who we really are, what really matters in our lives, and just spend some time reflecting on this. So if you get yourself completely unplugged from all of your devices and all your distractions and go and sit someplace, and I usually do this with a notebook and a pen, and write down what's really important to you. What are you fascinated by? So it's not just enough to say, I love playing music. What's particular repertoire or settings or kinds of audiences you like to work with? For me, it was always chamber music. And the weird thing about the way I think about my career and my life right now, so much of that work is about, for me, was about exploring what's possible in a score and working with closely with other individuals and creating something together that you couldn't on your own. That's for me what I love about chamber music, and those same skills play into when I teach, when I give workshops, when I mentor people. So it's like you're paying attention to the kinds of things in life that make your nerves tingle.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. That's such good advice. I can kind of tell a little personal story there to contextualize that a little bit for anyone watching. I was in school and I realized, about halfway through my time in music school, I was like, I haven't even started yet, and I already know like this isn't quite the right fit. And so like for me, I just always was interested in marketing. I didn't know anything about it. I just thought like that's like it's such an interesting thing. Like why do people do what they do? Like, and I was so interested in like, cause there's like all these worlds to explore. There's like, just like the idea of just like psychology is just so fascinating, and it plays such a big role in anything. So for me, I literally just started reading books. I read a few career books. Yours is one of them, Beyond Talent. I have like, you told me before we started the call, this is like the super old edition. So Beyond Talent, there's newer editions than this green one I have. But
This
and
is your one.
yeah, there it is. The one, the shiny blue one. I've got my like old green one that I got on Amazon like years ago. And and I read like your book. I read David Cutler's Savvy Musician, and then I just like like you and David and everybody started referencing these people. Like you kind of hear like, oh well, like look at what this person did. Look how they did this, and I just started following the path. And before you knew it, I was like neck deep in. I've got hundreds of books over here that I've read over the years just on these topics, and it eventually just kind of started shifting my career focus. And so it was exactly like you
Uh-huh.
said it would be. It was like just find just kind of find those things that like make your nerves tingle a little bit, and and just kind of pursue them a little
Yeah, I
bit.
think Yeah, some people when they're in school, they also do internships, or they're noticing the kind of courses that they're taking outside of music, and it whether that informs your music making or whether it creates an idea for another path or a side project. It's very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that was a huge barrier for me for a long time, and I think it's something that's like universally a struggle for everybody, is time management. So someone that's like you're a great example. When you were a student, you were pursuing like a degree. I'm assuming you were doing some kind of professional work in some way, shape. You were probably freelancing. You're probably teaching. You had like your role at the university as a teaching assistant, I'm sure. So what are some strategies that you've used over the years, or that you've seen like clients of yours use successfully, that kind of help with time management? Because that's like the one resource everybody has the same amount of, but
Yeah.
how you use it is like it's what it's all about. So like, do you have any thoughts on that? I would love to kind of hear what you've seen be successful
Uh,
for yourself and other people.
yeah. Um, the latest tool that I've been finding people find helpful is, or maybe it's just a different way of thinking about it for folks, but to think about it in terms of time blocking. So if you were looked
I'm sorry, say that one
at
more
your
time.
weekly
It cut off
schedule
like just a
and
second. You said time
oh,
something.
time blocking,
Blocking, got
time
it.
blocking.
Sorry, got it.
Yep, yep. So if you wrote out kind of what your weekly schedule looks like, and you've got set times for rehearsals or classes or lessons that you're teaching or whatever it is, to take a look at the other time, that the discretionary time, and to figure out based on your priorities and your values, when am I going to practice? When am I going to take care of the career related work, the administrivia that you've got to do? When am I going to rehearse? When am I going to do some future planning? And not with the idea that you're going to schedule every moment of the day. That's horrible, and no one wants to live life that way. But
Right.
a lot of times, a lot of times we haven't even seen how we're actually using the time. So if for a week, let's say, you had your general schedule and then you actually noted how, what was I doing during those periods? How much time am I spending on social media? How much time am I watching Game of Thrones or, whatever I'm addicted to? That you can say, wow, I have some choices here that I hadn't really considered. And you can schedule in the recurring things, the recurring decisions that you have to make every week. Like, when am I going to take care of laundry or groceries?
Sure.
When am I going to call my parents? All that stuff. The only reason to schedule that in is so that you don't have to wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, what do I have to do today? So that the things that recur regularly, you've got a time slot for them. They're non-priority is getting done during your optimal hours. So I think there's a way to be both intentional about your time and make sure that you've built in flex time that allows you to feel better about the way you're living your life.
Totally. Yep.
The other thing I would ask about this, Seth, is that the thing that this was like a big aha for me
Sure.
when I remember what exactly happened. I was in a Barnes and Noble. This was years ago, looking for a calendar for the next year, and I realized that I was having trouble. Keeping track of things that are far in advance. So let's say you're planning for an audition that's 2 or 3 months down the road, and you think, oh, plenty of time
Yeah, yeah,
until,
yeah, yeah.
until it's there. And so the thing I think I actually, cried out in the bookstore and said, oh my God, eureka, because I found a 3 month calendar. So it had three, separate pages for
So,
each month, and you could move it so that you could see 3 months at a time on the wall.
right.
And when I realized I had, the pocket calendar that I was using in my phone or whatever I was using at the time. I also had like a weekly planner because I needed to be able to see what's coming. But this thing on the wall, so that I wasn't going to be thrown when it's suddenly the new year and, oh my God, there's this deadline
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
January. So I think it's something that I experiment when I'm working one-on-one with a musician to find out where are they getting tripped up in terms of how they're managing their time. And then we experiment to find the thing that's right for them, because it really is individual by individual. But if you're tracking how you're actually using your time, if you just, not to police yourself, but be noticing it and writing it down for a week, that's a huge thing. The second thing was the time blocking, to be intentional about what you're going to focus on and when, to get the priority items really taken care of and the recurring decisions made. And then if you've got another tool for looking long-term at long-term goals, those are my best tips.
Sure. And so, do you have any specific like tools or things that you use or other people use that you would that would be a good place to start for somebody? Like for me, I use Actually, the thing that I do that help like on a day to day that helps me like kind of keep track is I literally my apartment is covered in note cards. I have so many note cards because every day before I go to bed every night or whenever I'm finishing up work, I literally sit down and say, okay, what are 5 things that I can accomplish tomorrow? Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 7, but like what are the things that I absolutely have to get done? And if nothing else gets done the whole day, it's a win. And so sometimes, like for
Right.
me, I'm researching for my book right now, some finishing things. So today, one of them, just an example for to kind of make that concrete, is I was like, okay, I need to find quotes that can work in XYZ chapters, and I
Yep.
did that, and it's like great. We're doing this interview right now, and so I just block off like 3 to 5 things. Sometimes it's more, but and if I get those simple things done, they're never like monster tasks. It's like pieces of tasks, and for me, it's just like great. It's just like a really like psychological trigger that really helps. And I'm like so rigorous with like my Google Calendar on my phone, and
Yep.
just using reminders. I mean, the technology's there, so like that's what I do. But do you have any specific tools or things that you've seen work really well?
Yeah. Well, actually, around the note card idea, Seth, I read recently a book about a book. I haven't read it yet, but the the title of the book is "The One Thing," and the idea is that you do similar to what you're recommending, only you make it one thing because most of us are so crazed that it's hard to prioritize.
Absolutely.
And if the one most important thing you get done in the day, you get that done early. Oh, did you lose me?
I lost you for like just a second. So you were saying if you get that
Okay.
one thing done early in the day,
Right. For many of us, it gives us confidence and energy to go
absolutely.
on to the other things. Wow, getting huge noise outside.
City life.
Woo! I don't know what's going on.
So
Yeah,
it sounds like a party. I don't know.
yeah. So the one thing, the other thing I was going to say is, it's easy for us to make an appointment in our calendar to work on this, that, or the other thing.
Totally.
For instance, I have a time blocking because I'm working on the next edition of my book, and so there's a lot of research and thinking that needs to happen in there. But if I only have it listed, like the 3 hour chunk or whatever it is, actually the way it appears in my calendar is do it.
Right.
I need to be more specific. I need to be more specific
Yeah,
than that.
absolutely.
So it's actually to be accountable to yourself about what specifically you're researching at that time period, so that you make sure that you've got quality happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say the same thing in the practice room, right? You want to
Totally.
be really intentional if it's okay. And for me, a lot of times, a short attention span, I use 20-minute chunks to make sure that if there's something I've been procrastinating on, I usually say to myself, I can do anything for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And if it's really nose to the grindstone, if it's a call that I've been delaying on, if it was an email that I feel somehow uncomfortable about drafting, if I just say, okay, I'm going to just do it at this point, 20 minutes. And usually in 20 minutes, you can either get most of whatever it is needed done, or you get that portion done and you think, okay, at least I started and I can come back to it.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I don't know. I can't remember what the author is. There's a writer that he talks about how every day when he finishes writing, he always stops mid-sentence. And the idea is that so like the next day when he comes in, he can like get an
Yeah,
immediate first win of like completing like he knows what it is. And so he stops
yeah.
mid-sentence. So like when he comes in, he just picks right back up and it's just like it's like a weird little psychological tick. And I use that when I write, when I write stuff for my site or
Yep.
in the book. I mean, because it's so easy to look at these projects like, you know, whether it's like writing a book, or if it's like start planning a chamber series or something, or a concert, or trying to like do outreach. It's so easy to look at these like things that seem really big and get intimidated, but the second that at least this is for me, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you've experienced similar things, the second you start breaking it down into pieces, and maybe one piece is the one thing you do, and by the end of the week
Right.
you'll have five significant pieces of the puzzle done. And which
Yeah.
like I'm awful about, like, I'll look at something and then I'll just be like, oh, I don't want to do that, and I'll put it off, and then like 2 weeks goes by and haven't done anything, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't do that. So like I that's great advice, I think, to just kind of break it down and be very like deliberate and intentional with how you're spending time on whatever it might be, whether it's practicing like, all right, the articulations and the exposition of this piece is all I'm going to work on today, and if I get that far, it's a win. If I get that much done, awesome. Yeah, that's
Yep.
super great advice.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the other things that that you talk about in your book, that is, I mean, speaking of kind of big projects and things, but you have a lot of great stuff to say about like fundraising and how to fund projects you're working on. And I think everybody at some point has like sat through a presentation at school, whether they're a teacher at the school or a student, and their brain and their juices get going, they get flowing, and then they get like, it's like fun to brainstorm and think about it, but when it actually comes down to like doing it, it's really challenging. So,
Yeah.
and one of the things is like, how do I have this project I want to do. Like, how do I fund it? How do I get paid? How do people get paid? Or how do I even just get the resources to like make it happen? So, for someone that knows nothing about fundraising, but has a lot of that has an idea of something, what are some tips you would give them to get started? I mean, like, are there specific websites that you can go to research to? Or there, I mean, you have a ton of strategies laid out in your book. So if you just talk a little bit about that for like someone that's starting out, has no idea where to start, like what would be a good place to kind of like
Sure.
open the map and say, I'll start here.
Yeah. I would say, Seth, that most people, when they've got an idea for a project, money is often an excuse. It's the thing they can't get started on because they don't have the funding, and
Sure.
and this is an easy out for people. And so the first thing that I would say is to sort of test that assumption to see, is there a beta version of your project that you could get started on. If you want to eventually create a full-fledged concert series with 5 concerts a year, all with your own ensemble in a beautiful venue and whatever, and you've got this whole beautiful vision, a lot of times we feel like we want only that version, and we're not ready to do the baby step version of it. But the baby step version of that glorious project is one concert, right? Because
Absolutely.
you're wanting to put people together. So that, I mean, that's maybe the counterintuitive thing. It's usually not about the money. It's
Right,
about
right.
the project. So, but the thing that I would say that most often happens when people come to me saying, I really want to do this project. I know I'm going to need to raise a bunch of money. I have no idea how to get started. What do I do? And my first question is usually to somebody, how much money do you need to
They
raise?
probably never
And
have a,
usually
they
their
probably don't know.
eyes, yeah, they're well, their eyes glaze over because they have no idea because they haven't thought it through. So the thing is to write it out. All of the things that you're thinking will cost money, and guesstimate or find out by talking to people, what does that actually cost. So I'll tell you, the advantage of doing this is, a lot of times, if we want to use this same example of starting a concert series,
Sure.
people may say, well, I'm going to have to rent a fabulous venue. And so you see that on that list, and they might be saying, "Oh, I think this is going to cost me 3,000 or 5,000 or whatever it's going to cost me." So we'd be talking about this, and I say, "Does the concert have to happen at that venue?"
Totally.
Right? And so where else do you have connections? Where are interesting places where maybe people aren't giving any concerts, but it would actually be very cool to have a concert series at the aquarium or um, in the science museum or at an historical home.
Totally.
So that's part of it. When you lay out these things in a, it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, it can be a simple list that you're making in Word, the item and what you think it's going to cost. And then show it to a number of people who have more experience or someone who has created a concert series, and have them be like a devil's advocate with you. They might say, they might look at this item, catering for the reception, and they might say to you, does this have to be an expense? Can you get people to donate? Would there be, families and friends or someone who owns a restaurant nearby who might want to have their company advertised in your program, and little cards at the reception saying,
Totally.
food courtesy of so and so. So I just think it's a great thing because a lot of times we can get in-kind donations. You don't actually need a whole bunch of funding, and you can be in a much better place for that startup mode. But if we want to fast forward to say you're still going to have to raise some money,
Sure, sure.
absolutely. People often, this is another trap, they often say, well, I can't raise this money because I'm not a nonprofit organization. I haven't established my group or
Yeah,
myself as a 501c3, and I need a lawyer who will help me do this. I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And I always say to people that myth that you have to be a 501c3, that you have to become a nonprofit in order to raise money, is not true. So, a fabulous organization to think about is Fractured
right.
Atlas,
I was actually just
because
about to
they,
ask you about that. Yeah.
right. So they're one of the places that provide fiscal sponsorship, and it's a terrific organization for a lot of other resources they offer to artists. So, for those listeners who aren't familiar with fiscal sponsorship, the idea is an organization that is a nonprofit can act as what they call an umbrella organization, and you, the individual or the ensemble that's not a nonprofit, can apply to a grant through the fiscal agent, through the fiscal sponsor, who will then accept the funds on your behalf. They'll often take a small cut, to pay for overhead, and that the funds will go to you. And there are a bunch of advantages of going through Fractured Atlas because they really help artists track their fundraising and do a very good job of reporting, and they sort of set you up well. You can then later on, if you choose to become a nonprofit, absolutely, you can still do that, or you can remain a for-profit organization. Nothing wrong with that either.
Totally.
So, grant writing is only one avenue, but most people raise money from individuals, or they use crowdsourcing, or they use a combination of those things. And the truth is, it's a lot easier to get funding for a project among the people who are already your supporters, who know your work, who care about seeing you succeed. That's a lot easier often than winning a grant, where it's a huge competition, possibly for the grant money that you're going for.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I actually kind of want to rewind just a little bit. And you said something that is like really kind of like made my ears perk up. This idea of questioning assumptions, I think, is hugely important for people whenever they're trying to, start anything, take on anything. I think it's really easy to like let your perceptions of something guide the way you think about it, and like your like mental relationship to the work, versus like actually saying, oh well, do I actually have to have that? Do I have to do this? Do I actually have to have that? So what are some other, like, are there any other common things you see when you work with clients where they'll say like, oh well, I have to have XYZ thing, and you're just like, do you though? Like, are there any
Yeah.
common assumptions that people are often
Yeah.
operating under. So, and like, what are some examples of those? Because I think it'll probably make a lot of people's heads spin when they think about like what they truly need versus what they think they need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this may be right up your alley, Seth, because I find this in terms of websites and in terms of social media presence that I often run into musicians feeling like I'm not ready. I'm not going to put a website up because
Right.
I, I'm not perfect and I can't pay it. And it has to look all professional and it has to, look like X, Y, or Z, my mentor, my heroes.
Yep.
And the awful thing there, of course, is that anytime people hear about you, they're going to look online. And if they
Absolutely.
can't find you, it's as if you don't exist.
Totally.
So I
Yeah.
would say maybe that's the biggest assumption. I mean, I also see this, though, where people trying to decide about starting any kind of project. Who am I to? It was like, who was I to write a book, right? Who am I to start a consulting practice? People feel like,
Those are all
oh,
questions I've asked myself in the last year and a
right, right.
half.
So you see, it's easy to think you have to have you have to get permission, right? Someone has to pick you. This is
Absolutely.
what I love Seth
I was gonna
Godin's.
say this is a very Seth Godin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the thing is, if you have an impulse, if you have something that you would really like to see happen, the thing to test yourself with is does the international super expensive glossy version of this, is that the only way I'm going to be satisfied, or am I willing to do the work to start small and grow it big? Because that's really the way the world works. Most of us have to start small, and the fantastic thing with doing that is you learn so much along the way.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm gonna make a real quick confession here to the whole world, and just an example of what you were saying. I mean, I talk to people about this all the time. People always come to, I need to have a website, I need to do this, all those other things, and it's a lot of times it's like, well, a lot of time I tell people you might not need a website yet. Like there might be other things that are holding you back that you're using a website as an excuse for. Like, oh, I don't have a website, so I can't be a freelancer. It's like, really? If you know like two people that can recommend you to be a gig, you could be a freelancer. You could be a busy one if you know the right people. And so, but like something, what you said about like, the website doesn't have to be perfect. My site, Musician's Guide to Hustling, is literally just the straight stock template that I was recommended by a friend whenever I was a part of a program, and so they were like, here, just use this and get started. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
made a single design change on the entire site, and it's been read tens of thousands of times from people all over the world. I've been able to build an email list and meet amazing people and talk to them about this. And I spent like $20 on the theme, and I pay money on a good host to host it every month.
Yeah,
And I've never, I mean, I build websites for people but I don't even
yeah,
do it on my own. And people are like, but it has to be this beautiful like images
right.
and these videos, and it's like, nope, I'm recording.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that works really well on your site, Seth, is it's very clean and simple and focused. And
Right.
that is what people need.
That's
So
exactly
if
why I don't make any changes to it.
Right. So if someone can't afford a lot, they don't have a lot of materials, they could still have a very simple landing page that helps anyone who's trying to find out about them, just to find out the basics. And you get to be, as the artist, you get to choose what's the version of the bio that I want to, put out there, because it's your story. Why let that be somebody else or someone's old video of a recital you gave 4 years ago be the only thing online about you?
Absolutely. And just the kind of one last thought on this before we
Hmm.
segue, is like the having a site and having everything online, even if it's just simple as like a YouTube channel or something. I mean, it's just the world is crafting perceptions of you, whether you like it or not, by like content that's out there. Whether it's your senior recital that your school posted up and you didn't even know or want it to be there. Like So like whenever you're ready to take the step, I mean, like you have complete control over controlling that perception of people. So like, and you know, you can. It doesn't have to be amazing to be.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my writing coach, one of the things he told me whenever we were starting out is, you know, it's like anybody that's writing anything, especially long form, it's really easy to get stuck in like the small piece of like, oh, this paragraph isn't what I want it to be. So he was like, dude, if you can just finish it, just get to the end, you can go back and do it. And so he was there's a really successful entrepreneur who runs a service called Help a Reporter Out. And basically, he has this saying where he's like, just be better than crap because there's so much crap out there.
Yeah.
If you can just be like better than, you know, all the other stuff that's out there that's just not
Yeah.
good, then you'll be fine. You'll be great. And so like that was like I was seriously while I was writing my book, there was like this little phrase, just be better than crap, just be better than
Right.
crap right through my head. And it's been
I have
like
a quote for you on this, because I don't know if you know the writer Anne Lamott.
I have her book on my shelf and I haven't read it.
Okay, Bird by Bird is fantastic. So what she says is just do the shitty first draft.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same, it's the same idea. It's sort of like, okay, I can do that 20 minutes and just get this thing that I've been procrastinating, get that out fast, and then go back and revise.
Absolutely.
But that's what all writing is, it's revision. So,
That's
yeah.
you mentioned that book. I'm going to pull that off my shelf now and set on my coffee table so I actually read it. I've had it for like a year and I haven't opened it. You're like the third person that's told me to read it. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to do it.
It's
So
really good.
yeah. So well, actually, you mentioned something just before we kind of tied a bow on the website thing about artist bio. So we've
Yeah.
got about 10 minutes or so here before we need to hop off here. So I want to make sure we're very respectful of your time. But can you talk a little bit about the approach that you would encourage people to take whenever they're writing a bio? You have a very interesting little system that you've talked about on your site that I'd love to kind of hear you flesh out a little bit for people that aren't sure where to start when they're staring at that blank page.
Yeah. Right. Um, so there is a short video that I did, the 4x6 of bios some years ago. I think since then I need to make a new one because what I've been finding, it's so important for artists to have a first person bio, especially on their website. This can work really well. And then perhaps more formal third person. But in any event, my biggest pet peeve with bios is they are so damn boring.
Yeah.
So for most musicians, there are these horrible long lists of awards they've won, places that they've performed, conductors they've worked with.
It's just a resume in paragraph form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and everyone thinks that that's what they have to do. That they have to just it's all about comparisons, and they're thinking about this as though everyone is like with a checklist. What has this person done, and stacking them up against each other. But if someone's considering hiring you, booking you for a concert, or if they're a contractor just trying to get a sense of your background, the only way they're going to be able to remember you from a gazillion other, faceless musicians who've all gone to these schools and studied with these people is if there's something genuine and personal and distinctive in that bio. And absolutely, I find that people have a hard time coming up with this thing, and because most of the examples that we've all read are really, really boring. And the cool thing is, though, when you hit a bio that isn't like that, it is so memorable.
Yeah, you remember it. You remember it.
Yeah, it really stands out, and it could be as simple as I'm thinking. There's William Christie, the harpsichordist and early music conductor. I think he's the fellow. It has a very standard, fancy bio, all his credentials that his manager has put out, and at least one version of his bio. The very last line had this thing about him being an avid collector of, I think it was 17th century Danish porcelain. And when in workshops, I'm often telling people this because then I ask them, well, what does that tell you about him? Like, what does it resonate? Does it matter? You know, and because the real thing is, does it reflect in any way on who he is as an artist? And I often have people saying, well, maybe he's got expensive tastes, they might say.
Right, right.
And someone else will say, oh, it gives me a sense of his aesthetic values, like this sense of detail
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
emotion and all these things that
What his
you,
dining room looks like, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, maybe, but that sense of line and color, it's an artistic aesthetic that
Yeah,
is
totally.
informing his musicianship. So it's a cool thing, right? You remember that. I've remembered that for, I don't know, I probably read that 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
So so
that's
this thing,
fascinating. 20 years ago. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
So all I'm saying is, it can be really helpful when you're working on a bio to work with a mentor or a coach, someone in a way who can interview you and ask you about the most unusual places where you've performed, interesting projects you've been involved in, your current fascinations, the things that aren't going to show up in your resume. And
Totally.
you might make a laundry list on a page, actually a column, listing all of these items that could possibly be in your bio. And for many people, they have a hard time thinking, what would an outsider find interesting? But in talking one-on-one with someone, they may be thinking, oh, well, I haven't played Carnegie Hall, so what am I going to write? The venues aren't that impressive. But then you get talking to them, and it turns out they've done some really cool outreach performances
Sure.
in very unusual places. And they're like the stories that make you want to talk with this person and make you really, I would love to go and hear a performance of this, what they're doing, because they're telling me all these wacko, pieces that they've been doing, unusual combinations, electroacoustic composers they've been collaborating with, and suddenly, you've got someone who's halfway to becoming a fan. So the idea is start with this long list, figure out a potential opener, something that might grab someone's attention right at the beginning. You can clump like items together. This is all in the video. So
Yeah, and I'll link that in the show notes so people
yeah,
can watch that.
great. I think it's very possible to make a bio that yes, impresses people or lets them know about your credentials, but more than that is the start of cultivating a real genuine connection with a potential fan. You can think of a bio as a call to action. If it's on your website, it's the thing that people will often read before they click play. We hope they're going to click play to hear,
Sure, sure.
or watch the video. It's like they're interested. It's their curiosity has
Yeah,
been.
it draws them in, and
Yep,
yep, absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, that's great advice for anybody. So, Angela, we're kind of wrapping up our time here. So,
Sure.
can you just kind of tell everybody you've made a very generous offer to anybody on my
Oh
list
yeah.
on my site. Um, so, can you just kind of talk a little about what this offer is for people? So,
Sure.
this is good for August of 2016. So, if you're watching this in like 6 years,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
but
Right.
can,
Yeah, no, Seth, I'm happy to do this. Was an offer for the month of August, as you heard in 2016. If anybody connected with Seth's wonderful blog would like to schedule a half-hour brainstorming career coaching session with me, I am happy to do that. And all they have to do is contact me through my website, angelabeeching.com. Go to the contact page, fill out a little information, and I can schedule that with them in August. I often find that people can feel stuck in their careers, and it can just be very helpful to talk with a consultant or coach or someone who's objective, so it's not your roommate or your spouse.
yeah,
You
totally.
get a clear, maybe new version and a reflection on a chance to sort of think through what are projects you've been thinking about, in what ways do you feel stuck, and we can do a little brainstorming to help you move forward.
Absolutely. So this is excellent for anybody going. I mean, it's perfect timing because it's going into the new year. School's
Mhm.
starting back up. Orchestra seasons are going back up. Series are going back into motion. So that's really great. I might fill out a form myself. And um, so, where can people learn more about you, Angela? So I want to make sure they know. Sorry, this is the old version, but
And
they
this
should
is a
check out
newer
they should
version.
check out Beyond Talent. And where can they find more about you and your work and just anything else that you want to make sure people can find you for?
Sure, sure, sure. So the website is really sort of the hub. AngelaBeeching.com. It's the same as BeyondTalentConsulting.com. All comes to me.
Sure.
And yeah, I have some videos with some portions of workshops that I've done and some tools for musicians. There's the book, and I also write a blog called Monday Bites.
Yes.
So, bad pun, but it comes out every Monday. And it's full of career inspiration and tips to get you going for the week. And I love to get questions from people. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, I will link all of that below so anybody can go. They can check out your newsletter, sign up for the free coaching. I'll link to your book, your site, everything. So it'll all be there. So everyone, it'll be at musiciansguidetohustling.com/Angela Beeching. As I'll make the page. You can just go right there. It'll all be there. Angela, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Seth, and good luck with the book. And I'm looking forward to reading more on your blog.
Thank you very much.